Hello, Rick Newsom here, propaganda minister for the Appalachian Brew Club with news you can use. I was cleaning out the basement and came across some yeast packets that had been hiding in the back of a drawer. Woohoo! Bonus, I thought. Then I noticed the date. I'm recording this in August 2023. The best buy date on the yeast was November 2016. So this packet of Fermentus 3470 lager yeast was probably manufactured in 2014 or 2015 and had been in my definitely non-temperature controlled basement for maybe 9 years or so. I didn't want to ruin a batch of beer fiddling around with 9-year-old yeast, but I was curious if it was still any good, so I devised a little experiment. I rounded up some sterile water, microwaved it a few seconds until it got appropriately warm, in this case 88 degrees, then dumped the yeast in and immediately wondered why I hadn't already put some sugar in the water for the yeast to feed on. So after scrambling about for the sugar canister, in went a quarter cup of granulated sugar, then stir and wait. 15 minutes later, nothing. I was convinced that the yeast were graveyard dead, but I still set a timer to come back again and take another look. And much to my surprise, at about the half-hour mark, activity. Maybe we got something here. So I set another timer. An hour later, even more foam. But then it was time to run some errands, so I mostly forgot about the yeast for the next 2 or 3 hours. But when I got back home, the yeast were obviously enjoying themselves after their 9-year hibernation. So what do we take from this? Number 1, don't be throwing out dry yeast just because it's a little past the best buy date. Number 2, if you're in a tight spot and don't have access to anything but old, way out of date dry yeast, make a starter first. Keep an eye on it and be sure it shows signs of life. You'll probably be surprised like I was and have usable yeast. If not, well, you haven't really lost anything. Number 3, store your dry yeast in the refrigerator. You can even freeze it, but according to Fermentus, the extra longevity you gain through freezing the yeast is offset by the damage that is done when ice crystals form in the tiny amounts of moisture that the dry yeast still contains. Fermentus says the optimal temperature is in the upper 30s, or standard refrigerator temperature. Number 4, even though the yeast seemed to spring into action when introduced to the right conditions, who's to say that it will have the same characteristics as fresh yeast? Good question, and I don't know the answer. The interwebs seem to believe that the effect of age on yeast is mainly to its vitality, and that the particular characteristics of the yeast, such as flocculation, alcohol tolerance, ester production, etc., remain largely unchanged. But if you prop up a batch of 9-year-old lager yeast and end up with a saison, well, oops. That's all, folks.